No charges have been filed. There is insufficient evidence to bring charges at this time. The Boulder grand jury has completed its work. No charges have been filed.
What we were indicted for, which was nonsense, was child resulting in death. And we were told, well, you didn't protect your child. And that's true. I mean, I regret that I didn't set the burglar alarm or check the windows.
When one note is off, it eventually destroys the whole
symphony. Nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Schlocket Science, the most inauthentic voice in true crime. When I read Count 4A from the Boulder Grand Jury, I see words like reckless and unreasonable and child's health. But there's a much simpler word for what they're saying, isn't there? It's neglect. Was JonBenet neglected? What does that word even mean? Well, it means fail to care for properly, or fail to look after, or fail to provide for, or leave alone, or abandon. Well, of course she wasn't. How could a child who was center stage in beauty pageants, getting her hair done constantly, outfits made, how could she be neglected? If anything, it was the opposite. I mean, she was being fussed over. And so what if she was wetting her bed and someone else was pooping in his pajamas? John is right when he says he feels bad about not setting the burglar alarm or checking the windows. That's where his and Patsy's duty of care began, and that's where it ended, didn't it? They were supposed to put a roof over JonBenet's head, and they did, and provide her with a bed, and they did, and provide 3 square meals, and they sort of did. I mean, they ate quite a lot at Pastor Jay's several times a week. As John says, the neglect narrative is just nonsense, isn't it? Because if there's one simple and obvious way to test the neglect narrative with you, with them, with anyone, it's to look at, well, how tidy the house was. Patsy had a tree in every room, and so in the same way the pageants proved that she took care of JonBenet, the Christmas tree decorations prove she was taking care of her home, doesn't it? Now, before we look at a few photos from the inside of that beautiful house to prove the neglect narrative, just how far-fetched it is, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis interesting, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So, the house. Now, remember, John and Patsy say they slept through the night, and they had to get up early for their flight to Michigan. So presumably they had everything ready that morning. So the way they were going to leave the house is the way they meant to leave the house, right? And so you can imagine that the last thing they did before they went to bed was pack up and tidy up the house a little so it would be ship-shape the next morning. Now, does this look like a house that's in the slightest bit neglected? Okay, but kitchens are kitchens. Obviously, kitchens are going to be messy around Christmas. So what if someone leaves half-eaten pineapple in a bowl of milk on a kitchen table, for a couple of days? Does this look like a lounge that's not neat and tidied up? Okay, it's Christmas, give them a break. Besides, the housekeeper was supposed to come after Christmas and take care of things. Let's go somewhere else. What about JonBenet's own bedroom? Okay, let's look at the basement. Okay, so the house is a little untidy. Whose isn't at this time of the year? Mine isn't untidy, and at least one room in the Ramsey home was pretty tidy. Doors closed, beds made, things packed away, and that was the little boy's room. That has to count for something. Let's deal with another aspect. Let's deal with the child's health. Now, it's interesting that JonBenet's doctor seemed to give the little girl a clean bill of health, while her autopsy kind of didn't. As early as the 20th of February 1997, that's less than 2 months after the incident, the Daily Camera reported on this contradiction. I mean, where does this come from? A pathologist's opinion that tissue damage found in the autopsy of JonBenet Ramsey would likely indicate extended is in sharp contrast to a pediatrician's conclusion that the girl wasn't. Even when it emerged that JonBenet visited this doctor, Beouf, 30 times in the past 3 years, that's an average of almost a visit every month, Beouf was adamant that JonBenet was a completely normal, healthy child. And she was. I don't know about you, I haven't visited the doctor 30 times in the past year. Okay, so maybe the health of this little girl isn't the best example. Let's deal with the health of the family dog. Another way to check whether someone isn't neglectful is to look at how they take care of their pets, right? JonBenet had a wonderful little dog, and Linda Wilcox said the following about it. First of all, Patsy didn't want a dog, and she didn't want JonBenet to have a dog. And this particular dog didn't get the potty training thing down very well. He tended to leave puddles. She says he was pretty much relegated to that's not neglected, that's relegated to the wood floor at the bottom of the spiral staircase and out the side door off the patio. However, but the reason they got the dog was because John told Patsy to get JonBenet a dog. Now, why do you think John told Patsy to get JonBenet a dog? Perhaps not get Burke a dog, why get JonBenet a dog? It was John's decision, according to Linda Wilcox, to get a dog, and Patsy chose a Bichon. She got it from a pet store, and Linda Wilcox says, I came there one day, his name was Sharks, a little guy, cute little furball. Well, one day the dog went to the vet and came back. But the dog that went to the vet was smaller than the dog that left. I asked Patsy, what happened to Shark? She's like, what? And I said, this isn't Shark. And she's like, shh, don't tell anyone. No one else knows. It turns out the first dog had something wrong, like some kind of liver disease or something, and it was dying. It was a bad dog, so she called the pet store and made a switch before anyone knew. Okay, so what happened to the dog? The dog died. It was probably sick anyway, and then she got a wonderful little dog, and look how happy and healthy he is. And where was this dog over Christmas? Where was this dog usually? Okay, so she gave it to the neighbor. That doesn't mean she'd forgotten about it over Christmas. So when the Ramseys did leave their home, after this incident, after it became a crime scene, they did leave the dog with Joe. They didn't go and retrieve the dog the way John retrieved the bicycle. And the neighbor ended up keeping the dog until that dog died, around about 8 years later, something like that. And so I think that just shows that it was JonBenet's dog. It didn't really belong to anybody else. So anyway, let's move on from the dog and let's talk about Patsy, right? She's not a neglectful person. It was Patsy's 40th birthday 4 days after Christmas. Did you know that? And Patsy was caught up in shopping in New York and Christmas parties and Christmas shopping and wrapping and, of course, packing bags for the family overnight for that holiday. How is that going, the packing of the bags?
Well, that's absolutely absurd. I mean,
I don't know that she wet her bed much. I don't even remember that.
well, she had accidents, but children do. It is so minuscule in the big. Does someone actually think I would kill my child because she wet the bed? I mean, I have lived through stage 4 cancer. In the grand scheme of things, bedwetting is not important.
Can't you see where Patsy's coming from? I can. In her own words, Patsy said bedwetting wasn't a big priority for her when she'd had stage 4 cancer and no guarantee that she's going to live much longer. And let's say for argument's sake that Patsy wasn't Boulder's Mom of the Year. Well, she had just beaten cancer. She was very busy with her children and an entertainment schedule, and she was allowed to be a little off her game. I'm not saying she neglected anyone, just that maybe she failed to take care of some things properly. And there may be there may be a reasonable reason for that. Let's deal with John. Anyone pointing a finger at John is clearly off their rockers. He said he was sorry, didn't he? In that interview on CNN, he said he was sorry that he didn't check the windows or turn on the security system. Shouldn't that be enough? And bear in mind, John was a big deal in Boulder in December that year. He was in the paper, he was Entrepreneur of the Year, and he was constantly not home because he had an important business to run. He was the breadwinner of the Ramsey home, and a damn good one. I mean, look at the lavish bicycles for everyone Christmas they had. It was because John was working so hard. And there was also a spare no expense Christmas on the 23rd, even with Santa present. A dude dressed up as Santa present, Christmas at home, Christmas with the Whites, Christmas deliveries to the Walkers and the Steins after that, and then after Christmas with JonBenet's stepbrother and stepsister. You can't say that John neglected Christmas, certainly that aspect. What is quite interesting in Lawrence Schiller's book, I think it's page 5, as early as page 5 of the definitive narrative on the Ramsey case, Lawrence Schiller talks about JonBenet saying that she wishes her dad was around more, and then telling the gardener, Brian Scott, that he goes away for a long time and I really miss him a lot. And then she started to cry. I think JonBenet was about 5 years old at the time. John also left the family on Christmas to go to the airport. He kind of had some things to, arrange, to sort out. But I don't think you can say leaving someone at home is neglect. If you leave someone at home and you go somewhere else, that's not neglect. People aren't like dogs. People have got jobs to do, and you can't always take people with you. Also, you can't always stay at home. You can't always stay at home on Christmas Day either. Anyway, the craziest thing of all, this was JonBenet's America in 1998. Someone was saying that someone had an affair with John Ramsey. Do you remember that? And John said,
Who is Kimberly Ballard?
I don't have a clue who Kimberly Ballard is. She came out of the woodwork. She called us several times saying she was going to the media. And I don't even know who she is.
Well, there you have it. I don't have a clue who she is. He doesn't have a clue. I'm not quite sure why he didn't have a clue with a huge grin on his face, but I believe him, and I'm sure Patsy did too. Anyway, to reiterate, the whole neglect narrative is nonsense from one end of the Ramsey case to the next. Everywhere you look, there are signs of not neglect. Not. Take JonBenet Ramsey's grave. When the cops wanted to exhume the body, John said no. Any loving father would. On the 1-year anniversary, Christmas 1997, in other words, detectives visited JonBenet's grave. They placed monitoring devices on a fake grave nearby because they thought someone might visit JonBenet's grave and give a tearful confession. Well, no such luck. Not only did no one come by, after a full year, there wasn't even a headstone, just a computer-printed page saying JonBenet 1990 to 1996. So, does the neglect narrative convince me for a second? Well, one thing I can say is that the Ramsey house is kind of an extravagant mess. Just this old house with new additions, the outside and the inside. It's kind of messy and it kind of goes on. And it's quite a lot like the Ramsey ransom note, an extravagant mess. But, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I do think the neglect narrative does pop up quite often in true crime. Think about it. Think about Chris Watts having an affair and then getting so caught up in it, he neglected his family even when he was with them at Myrtle Beach. Ditto Scott Peterson. Neglect also seems to be part of Rex Heuermann's story. In what way precisely, we still don't know, but simply in terms of the house he lived in, there's clearly neglect in that narrative. How about the Casey Anthony case? Is neglect part of the narrative of Kaylee Anthony? What about Madeleine McCann? Does neglect feature in any way in that story?
Yeah, she's absolutely right.
Is there neglect in Brian Koberger's story, either the fact that he felt neglected or ignored, or the neglect of one's own life that comes out of a protracted period of health problems, drug addiction? We know that he was struggling with visual snow. See, neglect isn't really a big deal, and even if it is present in some weak way in all of these cases, is it really relevant? Is it? Is it really relevant to, in the JonBenet Ramsey case?
So, she's talking about a thermonuclear explosion and adios muchachos.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Shit. Look. Look. We can't have any firing in there.
Just as we saw in the movie Aliens, you've got to be careful in a situation where you've kind of got a lethal cocktail. And if we apply this idea of an infestation of aliens within the infrastructure, the neglected infrastructure of the colony, we apply that to true crime, you kind of have a situation where you have neglect and keeping up appearances. Why is that such a lethal cocktail? Well, because the one reinforces the other. The keeping up of appearances, the pageantry, the covering over, the putting your best foot forward, wearing a kind of a public mask tends to get better, while whatever it's hiding tends to get worse. Now, one can't get away from the fact that John didn't protect JonBenet because he didn't check the windows or set the alarm system. What else was he supposed to do? The cops think that the bedwetting is a big deal in this case, and I don't think it is at all. It's got nothing to do with Patsy reacting in a certain way. I think it's got something to do with Patsy not reacting enough, perhaps John not reacting enough, right? And so is that an overreaction? If the overreaction didn't take place, aren't we dealing with something that is like an underreaction? And regarding the grave, one can only imagine how busy the Ramseys were in 1997. They were making media appearances. It was the same busyness in 1996 dealing with work. This time it was dealing with the work of innocence and establishing all of that, right, in 1997. There was also, to some extent, that same work going on behind the scenes. But it was also meeting with lawyers, appearing at press conferences. And so they didn't have time to do everything. And so one of the things, I guess I don't want to use the word neglected, was JonBenet's grave. So maybe they neglected their daughter's grave, even though they lived around the corner from it. The point is, it's understandable. They had a lot on their plates. The bottom line is, if you sat on the grand jury and you were asked to choose between the intruder narrative and a narrative of neglect, the indictment that was ultimately chosen for Patsy and John, would you have come to a different conclusion? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.